All right, welcome back to the next edition of your Profit Pro Plus training. In this edition, we're going to focus on part 2 of our recipes. In the first series, we covered batch recipes. Now in this sequence, we're going to be covering menu recipes. As always, we can hit enter to land on our default page, which will take us to inventory, or we can click exactly where we want to go, and that this time is recipes. So here we are in our recipes pages, and there have been 2 steps that came before the step we're focusing on today. So let's recap those really quick. Step number 1, we needed to load our initial PMix sales from our POS system. That system populates all of our menu recipe categories and our menu recipe items. Then before we can go start building our menu recipes, we have to build our batch recipes. If you look at your product in 2 ways, you basically have product that you buy that's ready to use, or product that you buy that needs to be assembled so that it's ready to use. That product that needs to be assembled so that it's ready to use for menu recipes is how we define batch recipes. But batch recipes can go beyond that, and hopefully you watched the batch recipes training and you identified where we can use that. But we will show other places that you can use that. For example, in our menu recipes, let's say we build a taco. Well, if every taco comes with a shell, or 3 shells, as the case is in our example, and it comes with 3 ounces of pico de gallo on every single recipe, and it comes with 1 ounce of cabbage for every recipe, we could build a taco setup batch. For this exercise, we're going to build each one individually so that you can see it, but we want to illustrate the importance of that training value if you have repetitive base items that go in the same configuration into multiple recipes. So let's get started. Let's start with our appetizers first, and you can see that we've got 3 appetizers: our chips and salsa, our guacamole, and our quesadilla. Well, the interesting thing about guacamole is that should probably be a batch recipe, and we didn't build that. And this is going to happen. After you think you've gotten all your batch recipes done, you're going to identify places where you didn't. So, before we start building our menu recipes, let's go build that batch recipe. Start with new. We're going to do guacamole. And we're going to put that in batches, and we're going to put it under produce. So let's save that, and now we can start adding the ingredients. The first thing we're going to add to our guacamole is our avocado. We use this 60 to 70 count, and for a batch, we are going to use 10 avocados. We'll save that. Next, we're going to use some lime juice. Here's my lime juice, and I'm going to use 1 ounce of lime juice for this recipe. Next, I'm going to use some cilantro. There's my cilantro, and I'm going to use 1/4 ounce. I'm also going to do some salt, and I'll use just 1 ounce of salt. In fact, I'm going to use 1/4 ounce of salt. And next, I'm going to use a little bit of garlic in my guacamole. Again, I'm only going to use 1/4 ounce. Now I have my guacamole. So we're going to save it so that the item is registered in. We click on guacamole once again, and now it gives us our opportunity to enter in our recipe units. I know for this batch, I'm going to get 40 ounces of measurable product from my yield, and we're actually going to do this in a 6th pan, and we're going to do 2 of those. Then we're going to save it. Once we save the item, now we're ready to go to our appetizer section of our menu and build our guacamole. Okay, we're going to simply add our guacamole from our batch recipe. And the reason why we made our guacamole in batches is because we put it as a serving on the side or to complement other dishes, as well as having it in this recipe. So in this recipe, we're only going to use 4 ounces of it. And We priced that at $1.99 on our menu so we can see what our food cost is going to be at 19.91%. But now we've also got the guacamole up there in our master inventory list under batches, priced out by the ounce, so that anytime we need to add it to another recipe, we can. So now let's go look at another item and build out our chips and salsa. Let's add our chips first. Oh, it's not under chips. And it's not under tortilla chips. So we actually knew in advance that we didn't have this item, and we want to illustrate how to add an item to the inventory. And I can promise you, doesn't really matter who you are, you're going to run across these issues from time to time. In fact, when we were building out the program first for our specific restaurant, and every subsequent restaurant that has decided to have us build these out for them, we have ran into this issue. So let's jump into inventory and let's add our chips. We're going to click the new button in inventory to add our individual loader item. Our item code, as we look at it, comes from a source, Mission Direct. We buy so many chips that Mission ships them to us on a pallet. And their item code is 1134211. Their description is chip, tortilla, corn. The category for this is going to go into our canned and dry area when we're taking inventory. GL code is a miss, and we pay $7.99 for 6 1-pound bags. There we go. And now here we see our 6-pack. That's 96 ounces of chips, 8 cents an ounce for our chips. We're going to hit save, and we'll confirm our item is in our inventory by going to our contains filter, and we see our chip, tortilla, corn. Perfect. We're in great shape. So now we're ready to start building the item in our recipe. So let's go to our appetizers and let's start building our chips and salsa. So we put in tortilla corn, which we're not making them in-house, so we're actually going to go ahead and delete this item. Yes, I want to delete it. And we're back here on chips and salsa. Add our ingredient. Let's start typing in chips. There's our corn tortilla chips. We are going to use 4 ounces of chips for our dish. And we are also going to use salsa. In our quantity, we're going to use 4 ounces of salsa. And now we can see that the total for our dish is 51 cents. Now, we know that we priced this item for $3.99, so let's take a look at our food cost. And our food cost percentage gives us just under 13%. Just as a reminder, we covered this in a subsequent video, but let's talk about the green light effect. We have a stoplight system for food cost where you set your thresholds in your initial setup. Your lowest threshold, or your best food cost target range, is going to give you a green light indicator when your items are below that. Your highest threshold will give you a red light indicator right here when you do your pricing, and anything in between the top and the bottom thresholds will give you a yellow light or a warning light letting you know that you may need to look at the item and make some adjustments, or at least keep an eye on it. Additionally, there are some differences up in this page that are significantly different than the batch recipes. This information doesn't have to go anywhere but to the PMix report, whereas the header information above the batch recipes is a little bit more specific and requesting more information so that we can send that data over to the inventory list. Don't forget, every time you put in a price change or make any change on a recipe, you want to hit save to refresh and update that item. Now let's move on to another recipe, and we will build our chicken burrito first. And let's start by adding our tortilla. We're going to use a 12-inch flour tortilla, and we'll use one of those. Let's save that. Now we're going to add our fajita chicken. We built this in a batch recipe, and we are going to use 5 ounces of our fajita chicken in this dish. We'll click save. We will add another ingredient, pinto beans, and it will get 3 ounces. And we're going to put some cheese on it. Some cheddar jack, and we're going to use 1.5 ounces of cheddar jack cheese. Let's save that. We're also going to have some sour cream on our burrito. We do 1 ounce of that. Next, we'll do our rice, and we'll use 2 ounces. And last, we're going to add our guacamole, and we're going to use 1.5 ounces. All right, now our list is complete. We can go through and look at all of our items. You can see our cost is $1.14, and we sell this item for $7.99. That gives us a food cost of $14.33. That's a green light item. Looks good. We're going to save it. And now let's move on to our next item. When we start with our steak burrito, I recognize or realize that I do not have a batch recipe for my steak. We use the fajita steak, so this is a great opportunity to show you how to copy a batch recipe. Let's go up to our batch recipes, look at our meats. I have fajita chicken. My fajita beef, which is what we use in the steak burrito, is the exact same recipe except for chicken. I use beef. So I'm going to copy a recipe. I'm going to copy from my fajita chicken. So I select my fajita chicken, I hit copy, and it says, what do you want to copy to? I want to create a new copy from my fajita chicken to a fajita beef. And I'm going to hit copy, and I'm going to hit close. Now under my meats, I've got my fajita beef, but it's going to be the same recipe as my fajita chicken. I use the same amount of marinade, and I use the exact same amount of beef. So I'm just going to change the chicken item to my beef item, and we use a chuck roll neck off for this. And you can see it kept my 160 ounces. Now it's at 21 cents or $34 for this batch. I'm going to hit save. And now I've got my new item. I'm still going to get my 160 ounces, which will be 100% usable. We're going to use half pans. It's going to give us 4 half pans, and our shelf life on this is going to be 5 days. I'll click save, and now the item is done. In my batch recipe, I'm ready to go back to my burrito, my steak burrito, and add my ingredients. We'll start with a tortilla. We're going to use one of those. Add our fajita beef, which is right here. And we are going to use 5 ounces of fajita beef. Now we'll add our 2 ounces of rice, our 2 ounces of pinto beans, our 1 ounce of sour cream, 1.5 ounces of guacamole, and 2 ounces of salsa. Last, we have our 1.5 ounces of Monterey Jack cheese. And when you see the item and you land on it, you can just hit enter, 1.5 ounces. And now we have our total. So we know that we sell this item for $8.50. Let's take a look and see how we did. Just under 21%. That one looks pretty good. Remember, after putting in the price, we're going to save it so that the price sticks. And that's going to wrap up the presentation of how to enter in your menu recipe items. As a good rule of thumb, it's great to go back through and check the recipe items that you've already done just to ensure their accuracy. This one was bothering me a little bit at 14.33%. So after going back through my recipes, I had noticed we were missing our salsa. So let's add our 2 ounces of salsa. And let's refresh our price. And now we can see more accurate at almost 15.5% food cost. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Profit Pro Plus training, and stay tuned for the next training.